Well, thank you so much for making it here. Now, we're talking about radiation and exposure, and luckily that's in the news. See, a lot of times, if you're like going through life, you know, and you don't really know what you should be concerned with or how to live, or, you know, if the media is telling you the truth, I thought this was interesting. This is actually the new symbol that the UN is proposing for radiation exposure. Pretty much the talk is right there. I'm done. No. If you understand, yeah, it's probably not real good for you. So, but let's look at this, because we want to break it down. I mean, obviously, you've heard about Fukushima. Now, we're going to talk about how nuclear plants are made, but also what radiation is, what ionizing radiation is, what non-ionizing radiation is, how that actually affects you. Would that be helpful? Particularly since you're being exposed to it right now. There's two types, ionizing and non-ionizing. And what that means is there's enough energy going in to change the structure. That's ionizing. And non-ionizing can just change it without changing the structure. And if you look at this, 3 different types, alpha, beta, and gamma. You don't need to memorize that stuff. Just know that alpha waves can be reflected off, beta waves can go through, you know, pretty significant stuff. Gamma waves can't be stopped. So when you understand that we're building nuclear facilities with 8, 10, 12-foot thick walls, with lead, with everything else, and we're trying to enclose stuff that's going to be toxic for 20,000 years, the pyramids haven't made it that long. Okay, so understand that these things are penetrating. Like right now, we've got gamma radiation penetrating from going right through the Earth. So when you look at this, what's an ion? When you talk about ionizing radiation, you know, you hear like negative ion generators. Okay, we'll look at this. An atom, molecule, or elementary particle that's gained or lost an electron. Positive ion has lost an electron. A negative ion has gained one. So what this means is, if you got a particle, have you ever heard of a free radical? Yes. What a free radical is, it's a lonely guy, okay? If it's close, okay? If you've lost an electron, you're going to try and attach to something. Okay, and this is what smoking does. It creates free radicals. It creates stuff that wants to attach to certain cells. And if it attaches to cells, it causes those cells to change and mutate. Now, negative ions, they're actually going to give up electrons. So they allow health, and that's why they have negative ion generators. So anything that causes an ionization removes electrons and creates a dangerous particle. So ionizing radiation and non-ionizing radiation can cause problems, but no, the biggest thing here is when an electron or an ion loses an electron, because then it can attach to cells. And you know, there's a lot of talk about how cell phones are bad or this is bad. They are. They are. Have you ever driven down the road and you see a fake-looking palm tree and you say, hey, that's a microwave generator? Yeah, you're being exposed to radiation. So how bad is that? Should we be afraid of cell phones? Should we not get them? Should we use them? Let's look at this. Okay, now these are non-ionizing radiations. And if you look at it, light, are we getting radiation from the fluorescent bulb? Yes or yes? Yeah, so how harmful is it? First off, you can see eye injury, thermal cataracts, skin burn, sunburn, heating of the body tissue. These are all the microwaves, raising the temperature, changing the surface, static like for MRIs, okay, vertigo, nausea. So all of these things, they can affect changes. So they're non-ionizing radiation, but that radiating, it's an energy going into the cell, affecting how the body works. Okay, this is all radiation. So radiation cannot be stopped. It's going into the body, and it's going to affect either the atoms or the cells. Okay, that's all radiation. When you look at it, we can use it. I mean, sunlight decreases MS, multiple sclerosis. Now we're going to talk about autoimmune disorders next week, and you're going to see MS cured, you're going to see lupus cured, you're going to see rheumatoid arthritis, blood tests cured, okay? And we're going to talk about how that works. But we can use some of the radiation, because this actually converts sunlight into vitamin D, and it's something that your cells need. Now, this is a crazy cartoon. Now, this is a cartoon printed up by the Japanese government to explain in friendly terms how they're being exposed to deadly radiation and a good hunk of their population is going to be developing cancer. They don't actually put it that way, so we put cartoon characters there. But you can see there's a rough chart, and it goes from chest x-ray, abdominal x-ray, living on Colorado, okay, because there's less atmosphere to kill the solar radiation, all the way down to instant death from acute radiation poisoning from actual ionizing radiation from nuclear plants. So everybody's going to get exposed. Mammograms, they're going to talk about this next week. Now, they're not recommended by science. They're recommended by doctors who are ignorant. Ignorant of the exposure, they're ignorant of the lack of effectiveness of the machines themselves. I mean, you take multiple pictures, you damage tissue, and it's not accurate. You're going to find out that thermal imaging identifies it years, 10 years, 9 to 10 years before a mammogram is even going to find a problem. Now, if the doctors are still recommending this, have them read these journals. Lancet, when we talk about cancer, we bring this up. But here's radiation that can be avoided, medical radiation. So when you look at nuclear, and this is like the stuff in the news, everyone's saying, oh man, the iodine. Well, no, there's certain particles. Because what nuclear is, we take uranium cores of plutonium, and it leaches off certain ions. Now, just the direct heat can cause burns. We're going to talk about how to deal with those. Uranium oxide, this you can breathe in. Radioactive iodine, this is why people are talking about the potassium, because how many people in here have a sufficient level of iodine?
Nobody.
Okay, according to statistics, only 10% of you have sufficient levels of iodine. Read that backwards, it means 90% are iodine deficient. And since your body is going to be hungry for cells, if you have radioactive iodine in the environment, your body's going to draw it in. This is why they're saying, oh my gosh, you got to protect yourself. No, you just have to have sufficient levels of appropriate nutrients. Does that make more sense? Okay, now let's say you have an 8-ounce glass and you pour 10 ounces into that glass. How much does that glass hold?
8.
Oh, okay, so you can have sufficient levels and not overdo it. Does that make sense? And this is with every nutrient. Every nutrient, your body has a specific amount. You don't get any more benefit by flooding your body with certain nutrients. Okay? You just need the appropriate amount. Now, some of the stuff, now radioactive iodine, that decays pretty quickly. That decays just in a few months. Strontium is thousands of years. Okay, we're talking around, they say between 10 or 20,000 years in cesium. Iodine is the big one. Okay, and this is one of the radioactive isotopes that you're going to be exposed to. Since you're deficient in it, it's going to blast you. Now, it's also, you cannot trust the news. You cannot trust the news. It's absolutely incorrect. That's the biggest thing. When I'm doing the research for this, I'm finding people that have been exposed to radiation, not only do they survive, they thrive. Okay, they're able to do it. Why? Because we're talking that 8-ounce glass. They don't thrive by pouring 10 ounces of nutrients in it. They find what their body needs, because all radiation, it comes in and it damages cells. It's either going to attach to a cell and cause a mutation, or it's going to damage the way the cell functions. Okay, but this is ridiculous. Now, you're looking at Washington Post, Associated Press, and Wall Street Journal. Now, they're all saying, don't worry about Chernobyl, it's no big deal. It's mainly just stress causing the illness.
Chernobyl or Fukushima?
Chernobyl.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to go back in history. See, in order to know where you're going, if you look back to where you come from, you kind of know the direction that you're going to end up, okay? So if we look at Chernobyl, now these are all, they're saying United Nations, Chernobyl studies are effective over balloon. We're going to also hear the same stuff about Fukushima. We're going to hear the same stuff about Arroyo Seco up in Sacramento. We're going to hear the same stuff about the plant just south of here. We're going to hear the same stuff about Washington nuclear plants that you're going to see in a moment. It's misinformation. And the reason is because the solutions are so simple. But if you were told, hey, look, you've got to start eating healthy to protect yourself from radiation, you'd start to think, well, what do you mean radiation? Okay? So it has to be misinformation. Estimated $250 billion to clean up the nuclear weapons facilities that they have in this area. And this right here, you're seeing normal legs, bad legs, normal legs. Okay, now these are pictures of Chernobyl. This is what ionizing radiation does. It goes in there and affects the cells. So now that could be direct exposure, or vitamin deficiency is also causing it. Now, they covered Chernobyl with a giant sarcophagus of concrete, steel, lead, as best as they could. Now, it's radiating out a lot of different problems. It's leaking into the topsoil. It's exposing about, they say about 3 million to 6 million people. So this is a good hunk of Europe. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in Greece. They're skyrocketing in the Ukraine. We're getting all sorts. And this has been 25 years ago. Okay, so to look at the second worst accident around, we can see where we're going. But there's also people, okay, that have been exposed that survive. Now this is something, how many people have ever heard of the Hanford reservation?
It's in Washington?
It's in Washington, okay. Now what they do, I don't know if you remember the Cold War era. Do you remember that? Okay, well, to build a nuclear bomb, let's go over this because we've got a number of facilities out here. Now, what this is, these are used rods. The way a nuclear power plant works, it's pretty ridiculously stupid. You take a uranium rod, okay, and you cause a small thermonuclear reaction, okay? And what this means is thermal means heat, and it comes from radioactivity. And you soak this in water because if you leave it away from water, it starts to blow up, get really hot, and then it explodes, and then you have a bomb. So what we need is a controlled thermonuclear reactor, okay? So that way we can boil water, and the boiling water runs a steam generator, and that's how nuclear power plants work. I know you might say, well, God, isn't the steam engine a few hundred years old? Yes, it is. We're just using something incredibly toxic that's going to be toxic for about 100,000 years to create power for about 20. Okay, I know it may sound stupid to you, but it made sense back when they built the plants. Okay, so you got these used up rods. Now, eventually the rod gets used up and it becomes unstable. So you got to take these rods out and then you got to store them. Now let's say we want to be tough. Okay, let's say we want to have a really cool bomb. Let's say plutonium. Okay, now what's cool out of this, you take one of these rods and you've got to break it down. So, just like you would normally break down, say, you're going to break down hemp seeds into an oil to save people. We're going to break down these rods, okay, into its constituents of plutonium. Now, you're only going to get 3 grams of plutonium from this. So what you do is you take the rods, and we know they're nuclear and hot and radioactive. We got to mix it with certain acids and solvents and titrate off the plutonium. So we have to go through a lot of different rods, a lot of different solvents to get about a softball size. It's called a plutonium sphere, and this is what thermonuclear weapons are made out of. Okay, now we have hundreds of thousands of warheads. That means hundreds of thousands of balls. That means about 91 million gallons of solvent that's radioactive, and it's going to be radioactive for about 20,000 years. Now, there's 55 million gallons stored at this plant up in Washington State. Now, could we be getting radiation for Fukushima? Not could we, are we?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. Okay, well, are we getting radiation from Hanford Reservation? Absolutely we are. And in fact, this happens to be the Columbia River there. They're actually draining in. They've lost about 1 million gallons of this radioactive stuff in the water system there, and it's going down. 65 tanks have leased over 1 million gallons of this fluid that we use to make, okay, nuclear weapons. Now I know it sounds like scary, and it should be. Okay, but we started something that we have to fess up to that says, look, we made a mistake. Okay, the crazy wacko hippies that were saying,